streaming now.
Good evening, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute. All right, the hour of 6 o'clock having arrived on this 18th of August, 2020, I will now call to order the Common Council of the City of Racine for our special council meeting. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. If everyone could please rise and face the east and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Our first order of business is the presentation of the city's financial status by Interim City Administrator Kathleen Fisher. I'm going to switch places with her for this presentation, part of the presentation. I think we're going to ask people to hold their questions until the end, and then we'll open it up to what I hope is a good set of questions and conversations. Kathleen?
Thank you, mayors and members of the Common Council. I have a relatively lengthy presentation for you tonight, but hopefully one of the reasons why we like to do this is to really, ahead of the budget process and the budget calendar, we like to give alders the opportunity to see a very broad sweeping scope of the fiscal position of the City of Racine before we start that budget, and allow you all to either tonight or once you've absorbed the information, ask as many questions as you would like to ask. And please, I encourage each one of you, if you have questions going off into the future, please feel free to reach out to me. And I'd be more than happy to talk through any of the items on this presentation or anything associated with the finances of the City of Racine. As I said, if you want to go to the next slide, Amber. As I said, this is a higher level presentation, so obviously there's a lot more details associated with the fiscals, but I truly hope that it gives a good transparency of the larger brushing strokes of the fiscal constraints of the City of Racine. I hope that it gives you guys the opportunity to ask some questions either now or again at a different time. And I also am hoping that it gives the opportunity for us as an organization and myself to present to the union leadership and get questions and really start a nice open back and forth dialogue relating to the fiscal situation of the City of Racine. So next slide if you want to. So this is why are we here. You want to go to the next one? Thank you. So many of you have heard this many times from us that the city right now, because of restrictions associated with levy limits and the reduction of shared revenues, the City of Racine, as well as many other communities throughout the state of Wisconsin, are in what's called, or what we're referring to as a structural deficit. And you'll see on this graphical presentation really what this means. So the city's two largest revenue sources are shared revenue that comes from the state of Wisconsin and tax levy. And what the state of Wisconsin has done through levy limits and the reduction of shared revenue, and you'll see on the purple line below, that they have limited that increase in those two revenue sources that make up 80% of our revenues to less than 1%, about 0.5%, sometimes even lower a year. However, on the cost side of the equation, the city has basic cost of service increases that happen every year, often many of them outside of our control. So on this graphical representation, you'll see the green bar on here is the city's cost increases each year. And again, many of these cost increases are just for basic service cost increases like pension expenses through Wisconsin Retirement System and basic contractual obligations with bargaining units, and those types of things. So our costs increased about 1.75, about 2% a year, but that gap in between, you'll see specifically in 2018 and 2020, that gap in between is what is our structural deficit. Next slide. So this slide kind of shows you graphically again what I just talked about before, that 80% or 79% of our revenues for operations are made up between two components, two things, tax levy and state shared revenue. So when the state starts limiting the two of those, it makes it very difficult for us to recoup our expenses. This slide shows you just a graphical representation of the history of shared revenue for the city of Racine. So in 2010, at about the same time that they imposed the levy limits, the state of Wisconsin also reduced our shared revenue by almost $2 million at that point in time, actually a little bit more than $2 million. And since then, have not increased that shared revenue hardly at all. In some cases, in some years, actually decreased it. Next slide. Thank you. Again, just another graphical representation of how flat. That top line is our operations tax levy, the blue line, and the purple line down below is how flat the shared revenue line has been. So just another graphical representation of that. So under the levy limits by state statute, a municipality is allowed to increase their tax levy by a percentage of what's called net new construction. And I think many of you have heard us use that term before. I'm going to talk about it in some of the next slides. But basically that net new construction is areas within the city that would have new development that would be included as net new construction. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay. So just to give you an idea of the net new construction for the city of Racine and give you a broader idea of how much net new construction it would take to have a significant impact in the levy. So here, the city of Racine's net new construction for 2021, we actually have this calculated already, is about 0.15%. And what that equates to is an allowable increase in the tax levy of $59,000, which out of a $90 million operational budget, while it is something, it is not even close to a cost of living increase. Now, just to give you an idea, so we have three large projects currently under construction in the city of Racine. The Ajax project, Gold Medal that just finished, and the Horlick project that is currently under construction are the three that I'm sort of referring to here. So on an estimated net new construction of all three of those projects, assuming that they finish by the end of 2020, we would get about potentially $300,000 of available levy for net new construction. So basically what this comes down to is for every $100 million of net new construction, we get about $1 million of available levy increase. Next slide. This is a graphical representation of our assessed value in the city of Racine. And it's a nice graphical representation to see that those assessed values are going up, which is a really good thing. But we really are not even back to our levels of 2011 in the city of Racine. So we still have some work to do there and some growth. Awesome. So now that we've kind of talked about the revenue side of the equation, I want to talk a little bit about the cost side of the equation. So how much does the city of Racine spend on operations? So in our largest fund, which is the general fund, we spent in 2020 about $91 million on operations. And you'll see here on this graphical representation, our increases in our operations have been relatively minor in terms of percentage increases. And again, these increases are for costs mostly that are just providing status quo service. You're not talking about any new services here, but really it relates to wages as approved by the Carlson-Detman study, wages and wage increases according to the labor contracts, your WRS pension increases that we have no control over, fuel increases that fluctuate from year to year, we have very little control over that, and then health care. Next slide. So how do we spend our general fund operational money? The majority of our operational money, about 79% of our operating budget, is salary and fringe benefits. Okay, so that means salaries, overtime, FICA, Wisconsin retirement, and healthcare. 50% of that relates to just public safety salary and benefits, 29% all the other governmental operations, and then 21% of our expenditures are just for general fund expenditures like professional services or supplies or things like that. So for 2021, when we start the budget process, there's always things that we look at right away. And what we have that's a little bit unique with 2021 is we have both the Racine Police Association as well as the Firefighters Association. Their contracts expire as of 12/31 of 2020. So at this point, trying to prepare the budget, we don't know what that potential increase would be associated with those labor contracts. Also associated with wages, for the non-represented employees, we have either a potential for a cost of living increase or a potential for step increases or a potential for both of those things to happen. So those are things that we have to consider as we're preparing the 2021 budget. Another cost item, again, that when we start the 2021 budget is we always have to look at the pension increases. These rates for pension come directly from the state of Wisconsin. Again, we have no control over them. For the 2020 budget, we have a relatively slight increase in the police and fire pension amounts, which is actually far better than the increases we saw last year. So that is positive, that there's only a slight increase in that area. But let me just point out on this slide, and it's a really good example, is our net new construction for 2021 won't even cover this increase in Wisconsin retirement. Our other large ticket item, and I've talked about it many a times, of course, is our health care. And I showed this graph last night for those of you that were on last night. Our healthcare costs have increased from 2010, and I will say that the majority of that is because of pure market conditions associated with healthcare. The market for healthcare, everything is more expensive than it used to be, and has escalated at a rate that is astronomical. Many, many organizations are seeing rate increases of 10% to 20%. The city of Racine is self-insured for their insurance, so there are years where we could potentially self-insure to have a good year, but when we're budgeting, we really have to be careful to not too aggressively budget on that, because if we don't necessarily have a good year, or if there's a surprise in any way, we need to be very, very careful about how we budget this. Now, you'll see that our costs have flattened off in the last year, and then you'll see a little dip in 2020. And that's because of some of the really, really hard choices that the council members made last year relating to the high deductible health plan and the health plan changes. One of the other unique challenges that the city of Racine has that many of the other communities don't have is that we have legacy benefits associated with what are called post-employment health care obligations. You'll hear it referred to as OPEB as well. I showed this graphical representation last night as well, but I do want to show you mostly the enormity of the obligation that we have outstanding relating to retirees and retiree health insurance. Right now, the city of Racine has over $300 million in post-retirement healthcare obligations. Next slide. I showed this one last night as well, but per capita, the city of Racine is by far the highest per capita OPEB liability in the state of Wisconsin. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about, now that we've kind of seen the revenue and the costs associated, what have we done already? What has the Common Council done already to try to mitigate some of this structural deficit? Last year, the Common Council made some very, very hard decisions relating to implementing a high deductible health plan. That showed us that helped us fill our budget hole or our structural deficit for last year of $2 million, and again, that was for last year. The Common Council also approved shifting the fire protection costs over to the water bill last year of $1.8 million. In 2019, the Common Council approved moving forestry over to the stormwater fee. That was $1 million. We also, in previous years, I want to say 2018, but it could have been before that, we moved the engineering department onto the capital budget to be capitalized with each one of the projects that the engineers work on. Last year in the budget, the Common Council approved to raise the recycling fee. In 2020, the city of Racine obtained a private grant to pay for 2020 elections of $1 million, which is going to have a very positive impact on our 2020 elections and the excessive costs associated with instituting an election during COVID, or actually 3 elections during COVID. The city also received additional CARES Act funds, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, to pay for unfunded costs associated with the pandemic. And then what we always do each year to all different levels is we apply a portion of our reserves or our savings account or our fund balance, I'll call it all different things, to try to mitigate some of these increases. Next slide. So this is a graphical representation of how much fund balance or reserves or how much of our savings account we have used each year for the last 5 years or so. You'll notice in 2018 that the Common Council approved a budget using $4.5 million of reserves, the majority of which was healthcare reserves. The reason I bring that to your attention is because it really shows that previous administrations did not necessarily want to make those hard choices that this Common Council had to make last year. And the way they did that is by using our savings account. And what that does is it becomes a very, very slippery slope as to how much we have left in our fund balance and in our savings account and what the ramifications of spending that amount of what I will refer to as one-time money in 1 year. So you'll see in 2020 that we brought that way, way down to a much more conservative level of what you would potentially use of the fund balance reserves in each year. So I do want to talk about fund balance a little bit here as we move forward. We have 2 major funds that have substantial amounts of fund balance and also restrictions associated with those fund balances. Our 2 largest operating funds that have fund balance are the general fund, which is our largest operating fund. And by ordinance, we are required to maintain at least 20% of the subsequent year's expenditures in fund balance in the general fund, in reserves, in our savings account, if you will. We also, I believe, resolved, I don't know if that was a resolution, but I think we resolved after the fact, when the Common Council approved the Carlson-Detman study, that any general fund reserves over 25% of subsequent years would be categorized in a category called wage provision and would be used in subsequent years to help offset increases associated with the Carlson-Detman study, as well as potential health care or anything associated with benefits or that type of thing. In the health care fund, by resolution, we are required to maintain at least 5% of subsequent years' expenditures. And if we would fall short of that 5%, we would have to transfer the shortage from the general fund, meaning that we would take some more reserves out of the general fund and have to shift them to health care. So both of those are very concerning. Last year I was most concerned with the healthcare fund because we were getting very, very low in there. And again, because we are self-insured, and we'll see it graphically in a minute, because we are self-insured, there could be a year where we have a bad year. We have multiple people that, you know, have a condition that costs a lot of money to have them have their health care. And we need to have that flexibility to be able to pay for those years that are uncertain. So this is a graphical representation of our fund balance in our largest fund, which is the general fund. This is our largest operating fund. And there's kind of a lot going on here. But that very top box, that blue box, blue shaded box, represents the amount of fund balance that is left in what's called the wage provision, okay? And the middle green box is what is considered unassigned or spendable. And then the bottom box is what we would assign to just general operations. So general increases in operations like fuel or salt or things like that that are increases but not necessarily wage or benefit based. So in the general fund on this representation for 2020, at the end of 2020, we'll have about $24 million in total in our reserves in the general fund. And that percentage in terms of subsequent years' expenditures will be about 28.8%. And I want to talk a little bit about, as we pause here, I want to talk a little bit about why it is important for a municipality like the City of Racine to carry a good level of reserves. The reasons are multifold, but the two most important ones is first and foremost, cash flow. And I know that that sounds strange, but much of our revenue is from the state of Wisconsin, as I talked about earlier. So we got about $28 million from the state of Wisconsin every year just in shared revenue. Those shared revenue payments do not come to us. We get a small payment in July, but the majority of that $28 million does not come till November. In the meantime, the City of Racine has to use its cash on hand or its reserves or its savings account to pay for payroll and the regular operations of the City of Racine. If we did not have these reserves or we did not have this cash on hand to be able to do that, we would in some way have to potentially short-term borrow for operations, which becomes a very slippery slope and extremely expensive. The other reason why it is so important to keep a good level of reserves, fund balance, particularly in the general fund, is each year when the City of Racine goes out to borrow money for our capital projects, we have to go through a rating process. And the rating agencies, S&P or Moody's, goes through all of our financial information, and they look at three main factors. And in our government, our strongest and most positive factor is our fund balance levels. And to be quite honest with you, it's one of our only positive factors. And why that is important is as that starts to dip down or any dramatic uses of fund balance, the rating agencies then say that we are risky, and it makes our interest rate go much higher than what it would be now. So ultimately, that would deem us to be a little riskier in fiscal situation, and our interest rates would go up on our borrowings, which would overall cost everybody more money. One more thing on fund balance, as I'm really beating this drum tonight. Also an important thing to remember with fund balance, and again, one of the reasons why, is fund balance reserves and a savings account is also there for emergency situations, no different than your savings account at home. So for example, this year alone, we've had various emergency situations. In 2019, we had storm damage where trees were falling all over and we had to use reserves to pay to help clean up the trees and get them out of the way. We've had flooding in the municipality, in our buildings, and while we do have insurance, we need to cover these costs before insurance would kick in, and often we have deductibles on insurance. So, and not to mention the COVID situation that we of course are currently in, all of these things, while some of the costs are reimbursable, some of them are not reimbursable, and some of the revenues are not reimbursable that we're losing on, and that is what these reserves would be used for. Next slide. This is again just a graphical representation of the fund balance levels that I would predict at the end of 21. Again, we're pretty early in the process in terms of even developing a budget for 2021, but again, from a purely fiscal perspective and from my professional opinion, I am not altogether comfortable going much lower than 25% in the general fund. This is a representation of our fund balance in our healthcare fund. So again, healthcare fund stands on its own. At the end of 2020, I'm predicting we'll have about $3.1 million in the healthcare fund balance. That is adequate. I wouldn't want to go much lower than that because of the fluctuations that we're seeing. I will also say that I did have a call with our healthcare people yesterday, and because of the COVID effect, and we'll talk a little bit about the COVID effect in a minute, they anticipate once theoretically everything settles down with COVID, that we will see a very significant uptick in healthcare usage, particularly in the late first quarter, early second quarter of 2021. So where are we now? So as we start to prepare the 2021 budget, I came to the mayor with a list of where I thought we were going to be. And at this point, it is our projection that we will have between a $4.5 and a $5.5 million deficit for 2021. I will say this, had it not been for private grants associated with the elections and for CARES Act funding, this probably would have been closer to $6 million. And had this Common Council not made the difficult decisions that they made last year and even the year before that, it would have been closer to $9 million. I do want to cover, of course, the elephant in the room, which is always COVID. So I want to talk a little bit about the COVID impact, and I'm going to come at this from a pretty high level. I most certainly can get into more detail. I don't know that I can do that tonight. I don't necessarily have all of the details with me, but I do want to give you a deeper brush stroke of what we're seeing so far associated with COVID on the fiscal side of the equation. So what I am seeing so far is we're going to have at least a $1.2 million loss of revenue in the general fund alone. That revenue that is going to be lost is not reimbursable through any grant that we have received through the federal government, through the state government, or any of the routes for recovery money or any of that. The majority of those grants cover expenses only, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But that $1.2 million of lost revenue is kind of all across the organization. So you're seeing almost a $200,000 loss in revenue just in park and recreation alone, because they can't provide their adult services, they're not doing baseball or any of those things. So that's just one example, but we're seeing it in permits, we're seeing it in municipal fines, we're seeing it in parking fines. It's really across the board of the organization. So that loss in revenue is what is most concerning for me going into 2021. Right now, we have over $1 million of expenses so far that are reimbursable through the Routes for Recovery funds. I'm going to talk specifically about Routes for Recovery tonight. There are several other grants that the Health Department has gotten, which the Common Council has seen come through the Common Council. But we do have about $1 million worth of expenses there. Some of those expenses, the majority of them relate to PPE and cleaning supplies and things like that, but also public education, some of those contracts with Kane Communication for public communication associated with COVID, also the small business loans associated that we did back in April or May or whatever month that was. So those are within that $1 million. Also overtime associated only with the Health Department at this point. The one thing I will say about the Routes for Recovery funds and the majority of these federal dollars coming from the CARES Act is that they are for very, very specific expenses, and they will never cover an expenditure that we budgeted for already. So what that means, they call it that you cannot supplant. So basically, if I budgeted for, I don't mean to throw Dottie K under the bus, but if I budgeted for Dottie K's salary, even though right now she's working on COVID 100% of the time, that is not reimbursable in any way. Next slide. So this is just, again, a little bit on the grant funds. These grant funds, all of them, are considered federal dollars and are therefore, just because of them being federal dollars, are very, very restrictive. There are very specific rules associated with them, and particularly for CARES Act funds, there is a very short list of what you can spend these dollars on. Again, I talked about no supplanting, and in the majority of cases, they cannot be used to reimburse for lost revenues, which again is the hardest part of the equation right now in terms of our fiscal situation. Each of the grants, regardless of whether they're through Department of Health and Service or Department of Administration, they all have specific requirements, very strict regulations. All these grants also are on a reimbursement basis, meaning, again, back to my conversation of cash flow, the City of Racine has to upfront that money, and then there's a specific reimbursement period of time that we ask for reimbursement of those funds, which is actually only on a quarterly basis that you're allowed to ask for reimbursement. So where do we go from here? I want to talk a little bit about, because I think there is some confusion. When we talk about a structural deficit, it means that we are going to have this same problem, this same story, this same conversation every year until the state of Wisconsin somehow changes either the levy limits or what we would get for shared revenue. So we are just stuck at this point, as is all of the governments in the state of Wisconsin. I think we've talked about before at length, development is key. That goes to our net new construction. It is obviously a high priority of the administration to get as much built as is humanly possible. But again, do understand that it takes a whole bunch of net new construction to get even $1 million worth of additional potential tax levy. So far, I believe the mayor kind of covered it in his speech. Right now, there is a hiring freeze. There are positions being left vacant. Any decisions that would have to be made with potential position eliminations, our hope that any of that would happen through attrition and not through any sort of layoff. The departments, each one of them has been asked to give the budget team a 5% and 10% cut scenario. So each one of them are doing a 5% cut scenario and a 10% cut scenario. We are starting to go through those scenarios now. We're meeting with each one of the departments. They all have been extremely thoughtful in the creation of that, but we wanted to let you know that that is what we have tasked them to do. Much of the 2021 budget, you're going to see reorganizations, reimaginations, realignments of departments or divisions or who does what and where it is done. You could see service eliminations. You could see program eliminations. This is very, very difficult. There are not a lot of tools left in the toolbox. And the other thing that you will see tonight, later in the agenda, is a potential question to the citizens on a referendum associated with healthcare. That is another option. It is another tool in the toolbox. It is something that the state of Wisconsin allows us to do. So that has been brought forward by the executive committee from last night. We can talk a little bit more about that later. From here, I've been talking for a really long time. I know that's a lot to absorb. Are there questions for me?
If we could minimize the presentation, and Amber, Alder Young needs to be made a participant.
Oh, there he is. He's on.
Oh, he's on there, great. Great. I see Alder Lemke has her hand raised. Alder Lemke, let's start with you.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate the thoughtful presentation. And I had a question about, there was a slide called COVID impact and then the one directly before it. So the slide right before the COVID impact slide said that, we were looking at $4.5 to $5.5 million that needed to be come up with in the budget. And then the next COVID impact slide talked about like $1 million in extra expenses. So, and pardon me if I just missed it, but does the $4.5 and $5.5 million structural deficit include all of the impacts of COVID, or is that still working itself out? I'm sorry if I missed the connection between those.
No, that is an excellent question. So the 4.5 to the 5.5 does include an assumption for the lost revenues associated with COVID, but does not include expenditures associated with COVID if they are reimbursable through a grant. Does that make sense?
Great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from alders? Alder Perez.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are there any TIDs that are coming due this year that would increase the money into the budget?
There are no TIDs that are closing in 2020, no.
Okay, I have another question. The hiring freeze is active now, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so as we look to the future, I'm aware that the police department has 18 positions open. The fire department has at least 8. And there are going to be several retirements in each. And that puts us significantly down as far as public safety. What can be done to mitigate that at this point? Is there anything financially that we could do to make sure that some of those positions are covered as any alternative to the budget or anything like that that could come up that we could unfreeze public safety positions?
I guess that would be a decision of the alders during the 2021 budget process. One of the reasons for the hiring freeze at this point in time, to be quite candid, is we certainly don't want to hire people and then through a very difficult budget process have to lay them off. So we're attempting to be thoughtful in 2020 because there are difficult decisions to be made in this 2021 budget, and we're not to the point where we know necessarily what types of decisions the alders are willing to make.
Okay, so we don't have any other that you're aware of any other sources of income that we could use for some of these things at this point?
Not at this point, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Perez. And Alder Peterson.
Yes, thank you. Question on the WRS increase, 16 point whatever percent. Is that shared, is that split, or is that the city's portion that they are responsible for? I thought that was a split.
Thank you for the question. That is the city-only share of Wisconsin retirement. The employee then would put in 6.75% over and above that.
Thank you very much.
Alder Tate.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, Interim Administrator, City Administrator, on your presentation, and also Finance Director in many ways. You know, everybody's wearing a lot of hats right now, and we certainly, you know, acknowledge the efforts that city staff are putting in to try and maintain what we have, even knowing the fiscal challenges that they themselves are experiencing as private citizens and that we are experiencing as a city, to kind of pay and ensure those jobs remain. One of my questions is, you know, as Alder Perez kind of mentioned, what other revenue sources are we looking at? I know we were exploring with the county, you know, the institution of a property, not property tax, but a sales tax across the board with a certain split. What sort of progress has been made in that discussion in relation to actually implementing that and then having those revenues kind of be equally, you know, or fairly, equitably distributed amongst the contributing municipalities?
Very good question, Alder, and thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, that is one of the potential tools in the toolbox, if you will, but that would be a county sales tax and would have to be approved by the county board, as you all know. I know that there have been discussions with many of the municipalities in the county. There are some that are in favor of that sales tax. But at this point in time, I don't know that the county board has an appetite for that. I don't know if the mayor has any more input.
I mean, it's an important conversation that's ongoing. Again, it is something that is required of the county board to adopt. We are one of, I believe, 4 counties in the state that have not yet adopted the optional half-cent sales tax. And the other challenge with it is there's no requirement that the county would share those resources with local jurisdictions. There's conversations that are ongoing. I don't know of any definitive plan or end date by which the county board might take action on it. It would certainly be helpful to communities like Racine, and I think other jurisdictions across the county that are in the same fiscal straitjacket that the state statutes have put us in. But I certainly wouldn't budget for it in putting this budget together.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, you know, as you talk about structural deficit, you know, I noticed that many of the graphs started at 2010. Obviously, a decade is a good time to look at, but obviously the trend was already going in that direction, in many or in this direction in many ways prior to that. So, kind of, what can you point to as a long view in terms of what structures have been put in place either by us as the city of Racine and or by the state of Wisconsin or county of Racine that kind of have contributed to the structure that we're currently confined in?
So again, sort of back to the beginning of my conversation. So Act 10 and 32, when it was passed, and these levy limits in particular, but also for a community like the city of Racine that does get some of the largest amount of shared revenue in the state of Wisconsin because of our urbanized community, both a combination of those levy limits that were put in place and that loss in shared revenue and then leaving shared revenue completely flat has really been the straitjacket that we've been put into, and it is debilitating, it is backbreaking. And to be quite honest with you and to be quite frank, it's completely unrealistic. It doesn't even allow any sort of increase for basic cost of living. I mean, it doesn't even pay for fuel increases at this point. So those are the 2 largest things that have really led for us, as well as honestly for the majority of the municipalities in the state of Wisconsin, to be in this structural deficit. I will just say that I have many conversations with other finance directors, particularly of the big five governments, but also the smaller governments, saying, what are you doing? How are you dealing with this? We can't even pay for basic services. We can't even leave things status quo. There's nowhere else to go.
Well, thank you for that. And again, thank you for the presentation. The one thing I will say, and as a piece of commentary, is, you know, one of the sections, I think it was number 7, the reimagining, reorienting, realigning, is really going to be the crux of what we have to do. Because when we talk about public safety, even, you know, public safety goes well beyond, you know, police on the streets and firefighters. Public safety is also safe roads to drive on. Public safety is good sidewalks to walk on. Public safety is children having something to do, you know, outside of school. So I think we want to broaden our understanding of a lot of things, as opposed to just the number of police on the streets. What are we doing to actually contribute to the safety and security of our community that goes beyond the response? And I think Alder Miedema will certainly echo these comments if he wants to, that prevention costs a lot less than the response. And we pay a lot to respond to things. But if we could invest, as we think about reimagining and realigning our resources, if we talk about how do we prevent things from happening, we might find a lot of savings along the way. So, you know, I'll leave the council with that. And, you know, as we go into this very, very difficult budget cycle, you know, it's time for us to put our real thinking caps on and say, how can we do things differently? And how can we reimagine, you know, how we typically respond to things and start preventing so that our funds can go a little bit further than they do today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Tate. Alder Perez, did you have your hand up again? Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. What is the impact of the health department budget? And I'm asking this with the idea of reimagining, as President Tate said, as we look forward to the future, what percentage of the health department is our budget? And thinking of, if we get rid of our health department, the county has a responsibility to cover or merge or whatever we need to do. But what percentage of the funds, I know we got a lot of grants, but what percentage of funding is actually dedicated to the health department?
Alder, I'm going to apologize because I don't want to guess off the top of my head, and I don't necessarily have that information. But what I will say is I'm more than happy to email out that information to you tomorrow morning. I wish I had my laptop here. I do not have my laptop, so I sincerely apologize. But I do not want to guess. I know that we did present to the alders last year an option associated with that potentially. I will say in kind of the grand scheme, the health department is a relatively small piece of the budget. Again, I don't want to get into specifics. For example, I know that the police department budget is about $30 million. The health department's budget may be right around $2 million, but I don't want to guess. 2.3?
Alder Perez, just to add to that, the other thing that makes that idea less of a savings than you might think, because I understand the state law, if we hand the public health responsibilities over to the county, we also have to allocate our levy that we're using for public health to the county. So we don't actually get to save anything.
Yes, that's a really good point, Mayor, and I thank you for saying that. That is true. Another one of these weird cruxes of the levy limit requirement is that if for whatever reason we would turn a service over to another municipality that we currently levy tax for, we lose that levy under our authority and we have to give it to the other jurisdiction. So that would be the case whether it was health department or whether it was another department. That is one of those very unique scenarios within the levy limit worksheet. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, our hands are tied every which way on that levy limit statute.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Perez. Are there other questions from alders? All right, seeing none, I'm going to thank very much Interim City Administrator Kathleen Fisher for her presentation here tonight. I hope it gives people a preview of what we're going to see later this fall. With that, we will get into the regular agenda. Just give us a minute here to switch seats. And also, thank you for Alder Perez, who asked a couple weeks ago about, could we get an update to council about what the impacts have been on COVID. This is a little bit more broader presentation from it, but in some ways it was born from his suggestion to have an understanding for the council of the global impact that COVID is having on city operations and our budget. And so we attempted to do that here tonight with the understanding that it is still very much a fluid situation and we are still working through it and hoping that it ends soon. So I will now move on to the committee reports section of the presentation that we have here this evening. The first committee to do reporting is the Public Safety and Licensing Committee report. And so with that, if I could get the keyboard. Thank you very much. Just 1 minute, everyone. I'm just going to get set up here. With that, I am going to ask Alder Horton if he could please do this report. Alder Horton, have you received any requests for separate consideration on your report?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Could you please proceed with your report, sir?
All right, 049620, communication sponsored by Alder Cole submitting an application for change of agent with a Class B liquor license for Wisconsin Applebee LLC, doing business as Applebee's Neighborhood Bar and Grill located at 2521 South Green Bay Road. Ryan Sale agent recommendation is to approve. 0497-20, communication sponsored by Alder Cole submitting an application for a change of agent with a Class B club liquor license for the Yacht Club, doing business as a yacht club located at 1 Barker Street. Kimberly Shorters agent recommendation is to approve. 0498-20, communication by Alder Cole submitting the application for a Class B retail fermented malt beverage and liquor license for Repetta Properties LLC, 2207 Lathrop Ave, Abigail Repetta agent, 11 District. Recommendation is to approve. And that is the conclusion of the public license and safety report, Your Honor.
All right. Without objection, we will add these items to the consent agenda. We'll now then move on to our next report, and this is the Community Development and Block Grant Advisory Board. I'm going to ask Alder Tate. Alder Tate, do you have any items for separate consideration?
I've received no such requests.
Could you please proceed with your report?
I certainly shall. Item 0519-20, request sponsored by Mayor Mason recommending the adoption of substantial amendments to the City of Racine 2019 Annual Action Plan and Citizen Participation Plan. Recommendation is to adopt as presented. Fiscal note, the proposed amendment would allow the city to accept and allocate $1.108 million, $649 on the back end, of CARES Act Community Development Block Grant funds and reallocate other CDBG funds and accept $1,224,679 in Emergency Solutions Grant funding to undertake emergency COVID response activities. And that concludes the Community Development Block Grant Board report.
Are there any questions on this item? I just do want to mention Vicki Selko is here to answer any questions if people have questions about some of this emergency funding that we received in CDBG funds in the midst of the coronavirus. Seeing no questions, we will put this item on the consent agenda. The next report is the Office of the Mayor report by Alder Tate. Alder Tate, could you proceed with the report? Do you have any items for separate consideration?
I received no such requests.
Please proceed with your report.
Item 0531-20, communication sponsored by Mayor Mason submitting a veto to the Common Council's action on item 0478-20. Item 0554-20, communication sponsored by Mayor Mason requesting for authorization to compete for an Opportunity Zone Impact Investment. The recommendation is to approve the request and authorize to compete for an Opportunity Zones Impact Investment. Fiscal note up to $25 million is available. If selected, the investment would require a 20% match.
Is there any questions or consideration for either of these items?
I do have
Seeing
a
none,
question. I do have a question on item 0554-20.
Please proceed with your question. I should say Will Martin should be here momentarily, but is not yet. But I will try to do my best to answer your question.
My only question was as relates to the fiscal note. So, you know, if we happen to get the 25 million total, that would mean a 5 million match required. From where, you know, in our fiscal situation,
it's a great question. It is not a required city match. It is a match that somewhere within the community, be that public or private, that there is at least $5 million of local economic activity happening in that area. So, for example, the work that RUSD recently did and Julian Thomas to build out the community center would be one type of example of the sort of thing that would count toward that match.
Okay. So is our kind of presumption to a degree is if we were to get, you know, the entirety, which I think that's probably not the expectation, but if we were, then the expectation would be that we would be seeking out other partners to help fulfill that match outside of our own. Okay.
Yeah, that bridge building is occurring now. So obviously, like, your ability to make a compelling application depends on your ability to identify local partners, both public and private, to make a good application. So in other words, when you make the application, you can't say, give us the money and then we'll come up with a match. You have to demonstrate what sort of activity and interest there is in that work as you make the presentation, as I understand it, as Mr. Martin has explained it to me. And my apologies, I estimated that if he was here by 7 o'clock, he would have plenty of time to get to his agenda item, and we are 4 minutes before that, and he's
That's okay.
not yet here. That fault is entirely my own. Alder Peterson?
Yes, on that same line of questioning, if we accept the $25 million and there are no other public agencies or private investments or whatever willing to assist us, are we locked into matching the 20 out of our pocket, or can we just turn down the grant? Does that then come to, if you want, it comes out of the government funds being the city funds, does that come back to the alderman, or do you have total, does somebody in the city hall have total control over that?
Yeah, there's no city guarantee of a match here. This is not an appropriation of funds. It's an ask to put together a presentation. Again, as I understand it, as Mr. Martin has explained it to me, that how well you compete for the grants will depend on how well you can demonstrate the kind of local investments that would be made in the area.
Okay, so if there was any appetite or desire to use city funds, that would have to come back to the common council?
That's correct. This is not an allocation of funds. That's correct, Alder Peterson. So
Thank you very much.
If there was a city allocation to be made as part of it, that would have to be identified and come back to council.
Thank you very much.
There he is. Sorry. Sorry to put Mr. Martin on the spot here. I told him to get here at 7. He is a few minutes early. We moved along faster than I would have guessed. Both Alder Tate and Alder Peterson asked some good questions about what the local match is. Is it obligating the city to be the $5 million match? I'd explained no, and that we would, if there were obligations to be made, we would have to come back and ask for them. But if you wouldn't mind just spending 2 minutes giving an overview of this, that would be great.
So we've talked about before opportunity zones. We have 3 in the city. Those are for Uptown, Downtown, and Lincoln King, essentially. This project would allow us to compete nationally, to be one of 10 cities to get up to $25 million in impact investment. This would be money that, it is not a grant. It would be money that has a return attached to it. But this would allow us to bring a new investment it translates. So if you take $25 million worth of impact investment, new money coming to the city, with a $5 million match, that $30 million can be translated to $86 million worth of new development in the city. And so for that reason, we really want to be able to move quickly to compete for this. The opportunity closes at the end of this month, so we have a short timeline to pull it together. The match, they have made it fairly simple for us to be able to look at a number of different ways of reaching it. It can be public, it can be private, it can be philanthropic dollars, it can be long-term leasing of space. So there are a number of ways to get to the match. It is not, it's not all hard cash to the construction or other items. It can be in support of the project in a variety of different ways. It does not all come from the city. There can be business partners. In the same way that we look at developers who come in, there are ways for us to partner with the private sector to pull this off. But obviously this would be a huge infusion into communities that have seen less than the amount of investment that they would like to see. Let me just say one last thing. This, because it's impact investment, it's different from typical investment in these two ways. One is they're not looking to get only a financial return. They're looking for a long-term relationship that has some financial return, but also importantly, they want to see social return. So the same things the council has talked about in terms of creating family-supporting jobs and helping people who are low to moderate income be able to break into those careers. These are the same kinds of things they would like to see this money support, whether it's creating new construction jobs to build the projects, or it is, for instance, new manufacturing jobs, new healthcare jobs, the kinds of things that would sustain them after the things are built.
Any other questions for Mr. Martin? Seeing none, and with no request for separate consideration, I will move these items.
The 0531, the report of your veto,
yes,
shouldn't go on the consent agenda.
Okay.
There's no motion to override. It's just information that you've given the Common Council and nothing happens with that.
Okay. Then without objection, item 0554-20 will move on to the consent agenda. We will then move on to the executive committee report by Alder Tate. Alder Tate, do you have any items for separate consideration?
Yes, first item for separate consideration is item 0530-20. Communication sponsored by Mayor Mason requesting to adopt ordinance 0008-20, Transit Commission modification. Move to adopt.
The motion to adopt the item, is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a second from Alder Horton. Thank you. Alder Tate, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Okay. Alder Perez.
Thank you, Your Honor. Why the change now? I mean, I was looking at this and, okay, 2 alders instead of 1, you appoint the chair, not commissioners. Was the commission that we had before insufficient? What is going on that you want to change this?
That's a great question, Alder Perez. So last year we entered into a multi-jurisdictional agreement with Mount Pleasant around our transit commission. And so there were things perhaps not envisioned when it became a multi-jurisdictional commission. Certainly the need to have, I think, a second aldermanic voice on the commission certainly keeps it closer to there and makes clear that while this is an intergovernmental commission, the intention is that the chair should always be somebody who's a member of the Common Council. And the question about why now, I believe the first meeting of that council will occur sometime in the next month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Peterson?
Yes, I guess I just questioned a similar line of question. I had an issue with the why you can't trust. I mean, you still have 7 of the 9 coming from the city, I believe, are appointed by you. I don't see why you need to appoint the the chair of the commission. I would think that being that you have 7 of the 9, they should be able to figure it out amongst themselves.
Any other discussion on the item? Seeing none,
I have my hand up.
oh, I'm sorry, Alder Lemke, I didn't
Jeff-
see you there.
Yeah,
Please
Jeff, was
proceed.
that a question or a statement? Because I didn't hear. Was that rhetorically posed, or were you?
It was a question. I said, I don't know why. That's a question.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the reason being, I think again, these are intergovernmental bodies, but they're city assets, and certainly our experience with other commissions has been that it's not always the case that that the scenario that you're laying out, Mr. Peterson, is always the case. So I think it's important for us to do intergovernmental work, but I also think it's important for the city to maintain control of its assets and its resources. Other questions? All right, who's the first vote of the night?
Alder Peterson.
Okay, Alder Peterson, you are the first vote of the night, and then we will open up the roll and go down the list as it appears, but Alder Peterson, you are the first vote of the evening. The clerk will open the roll on the item. When she calls your name, please vote as you wish.
No.
Alder Peterson?
No.
Let me go down my list.
No, this list.
Okay. Alder Tate?
Aye.
Alder Perez?
No.
Alderwoman Glenn?
No.
Alder Santiago?
Aye.
Alder Mikma?
Aye.
Alder Cole?
Aye.
Alder Levy?
Aye.
Alder West?
Aye.
Alder Land?
Aye.
Alder Horton?
Aye.
Alder Lemke?
Aye.
Alder Jones?
Aye.
Alder Taft?
Aye.
Yep.
We have 3 noes and
I did not
Oh,
vote.
Alder Young.
Miss Alder Young.
Alder Young, sorry. All right, so
So we have 12 ayes
12
and
ayes.
3 noes. The motion carries. Moving on to the next item on the report, or moving back to the executive committee report. Alder Tate, do you have other items for separate consideration?
Yes, item 0553-20, communication sponsored by Alder Tate, Alder Coe, and Alder Taft, proposing that the Common Council pass a resolution to place a referendum on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot to pose the question of increasing the property tax levy for the purpose of paying costs associated with health insurance for City of Racine retired employees. Move to adopt.
The motion to adopt. Alder Coe, is there a second?
Second. Second.
Discussion. Discussion on the item. I'll start with the maker of the motion. Alder Tate, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, the purpose of this, as I think Finance Director / Interim City Administrator Fisher said, is we have a toolbox and a problem that's in front of us, and this is one of the tools that I think it's just simply responsible for us to attempt to apply as we deal with the situation before us. It's not, and personally, as a representative, as an alder, I don't have a position on whether this passes or doesn't, but I do think it's necessary that we ask the question as being responsible to the City of Racine to deal with the situation that we're facing. We have to use every tool or at least we should be attempting to use every tool that's available to us. So asking this particular question is important. And, ultimately, whatever our voters say, if this does pass and is on the referendum ballot, if the voters vote, then we should take that into account. Well, we will have to take that into account. But ultimately, it will inform us what sort of scenario we're dealing with in the future, whether we'll have a few million more dollars to navigate the crises that we're facing, the structural deficit that will remain, or whether we won't, and we have to make significantly harder decisions, but decisions that I'm ready to make nonetheless, whatever they may be. I'm ready for the hard decisions, but I think it's important as alders that we use every tool that's available to us to deal with the crises that we're facing, and certainly give our voters a say-so in the tools that we have available to us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Tate. Alder Perez, you had your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree with President Tate. Difficult situation for us. However, my concern is this. You know, we vote to put the resolution on. It says that we're implied, it doesn't say direct, it implicates or implies that we're against our retirees. If we don't do it, then we're against our taxpayers. It puts us in a really difficult situation. And I guess we're called to make those tough calls. But I think a resolution at this time, before there is another resolution to other issues that are in the air with this, is it's too far ahead. I think this may be good, but not at this time. Maybe later on when we have a firm choice on what we need to do going forward. So I would say that this is not the right time for this resolution, although I understand its necessity as we move forward, as we want to do the will of our constituents. But it's really put us in a difficult situation where if we don't support it, we're against one group, and if we do support it, we're against another group. And I don't think it's the right time right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Perez. I'm going to ask the city attorney just to clarify the deadline by which the council would have to adopt a question to have this resolution appear as a referendum, or frankly, any resolution, the deadline by which the council would have to act for it to appear on November's ballot.
Right. If the common council would want this to appear on the November 3rd ballot, the ballot question has to go to the Elections Commission no later than 70 days before the election. 70 days before the election is August 25th. So if the council wants this to be on the November ballot, this is effectively the last moment the council has to make this decision. If not, then it would be at some later point if the council decides to do it then, some later election.
Alder Peterson.
Yes, curious why they're calling it the cost of retirees' health insurance. Are we anticipating settling with the lawsuit? Are we anticipating going back to the old insurance policy that we've had for them in the past? Or I don't understand why this is considered covering retirees' health insurance.
Sure. Well, first of all, the statute requires any referendum to state the purpose of whatever it is. So there's a requirement that the Common Council's resolution approve a referendum for a specific purpose. I think the mayor and the city administrator have decided that the retiree health insurance is the best thing to put on this referendum because that is one of the most difficult pieces of the budget to deal with. This would not, by this approval, settle or pay any of those 352 claims that the council has already denied. It really is not specifically related to that, except that those are retirees, and there are more retirees than those 352 that are on the health plan. So they're coincidental in the fact that they're within a couple of months each other that we're talking about it, but they are not specifically related to each other.
Could this money be used to settle that?
Well, this, if approved, this is money, and I don't want to speak for the finance director, but this is money that will go into the city's health insurance fund, which generally we don't use health insurance fund monies to settle lawsuits, but I suppose the Common Council could approve that. I don't want to speak for Kathleen.
So you're right, Scott, that this is intended to be used for current operating costs associated with retiree health care. retiree health care in total costs the city annually about $9.5 million a year. So this is only a portion of our costs each year. So this would just be used into the health insurance fund to assist in our operational costs and the structural deficit that we talked about for an hour, associated with our regular operating budget and with current benefits as they are today.
Okay. I guess I would be more comfortable with just asking for an increase in the levy itself for operating expenses. I don't know that this is going to be received very well as putting it on the retirees for being the angst. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Peterson. Alder Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have reservations about this, and we had a very healthy discussion at the executive committee about what this would do as a question if it were approved by the voters. You know, the city of Racine already in comparison to our neighbors has a dramatic tax rate in comparison. If you look at Mount Pleasant, if you look at Caledonia and the city of Racine. Now, this makes sense because the city of Racine has different needs because it's legacy city, it's a larger urban center, and so we need to make sure that we're providing different types of services. But one of the things that were on our interim city administrator's list about how we're going to get out of our budget troubles is development. And one of the main challenges that we have as a city is that our tax rate in comparison to our neighbors is startling. And so in my mind, the way that we fill our budget hole and we face our budget challenges is by being as competitive as possible. And so that means encouraging that type of development. And the way that we encourage that type of development isn't by going in this direction, but it's by going the direction we have the past couple of years of reducing that rate. And so I have concern about the 6.4% increase as the question, because I think that there are other ways that we could address the challenges that exist. And I appreciate the work that the staff has done on trying to use every tool in the toolbox. I just think that this is not necessarily the tool for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Young. Alder Mietma.
Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you to the council members and this healthy discussion. I was able to sit in on last night's discussion and listen to that, and it took a good bit of thinking to really come to the conclusions I've come on this, and I think that I as well am carrying some level of reservation about this path forward, and I think that it certainly is a difficult decision on either, because we clearly have a gap to close. We clearly have a lot of barriers in place to try and figure out how to overcome. While I agree with President Tate's assessment that we may have to make hard decisions, I think that this is equally difficult because we're putting members of our community potentially at greater risk. So one of my biggest hangups with this is the question of it being equitable. We're looking at a scenario where we have also a community where we are ranked second worst for African Americans, and one of the factors in that is home ownership. As we're also fighting a struggle to try and create more opportunity for minority populations to become homeowners, this is putting yet another barrier. If this were to pass, would be putting another barrier in their path when we're trying to create a more equitable community. So I have trouble with that. I have trouble with the concept of the competitiveness, as Alder Young had said before. I think that while the intentions behind this are good, I think we also need to be conscious of being able and willing to protect the most vulnerable people in our community, people that are trying to get their lives started, trying to come into home ownership, trying to be business owners, or whatever the case may be. This will be another barrier in that path. And I don't think that this is the right path to take at this time to solve this budget problem. I think that it's not setting a good tone for how we want to move our community forward for years to come. We talked about prevention, or Alderman Tate talked about prevention, and this is a reactive strategy where we are reacting to years of whatever the scenarios are that got us here. And this is just another way to plug a hole I'd rather sit down and have a much more in-depth discussion about how we can be proactive and preventative. And part of that is protecting these populations that we're so desperately trying to find a way to bring up to the top tier where we need them to be. So because of that, I'm not going to be able to support this proposal for a referendum tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Mi'kmaq. Alder Taft.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the arguments in favor of, I understand the reservations of some of my colleagues regarding this particular resolution. I want to reiterate what President Tate said, that this isn't necessarily, we're not voting to endorse the referendum necessarily, we're voting to give our voters a say. And so the idea that, that we shouldn't do this now because it could potentially put us in a politically sticky situation, I think we should reject that argument. We're going to be making some very difficult decisions regarding the budget one way or the other. And healthcare costs do not exist in a vacuum. If we can't address the rising healthcare costs, we're going to have to address them some other way. And that they're not independent, and they're going to have, the other kinds of cuts are going to have a negative impact on services and other vulnerable members of our city. So I think that we are going to continue to have to make difficult budget decisions. And I think the voters deserve the right to weigh in on how they would like us to handle this. And I think that this is important. Another thing that came up in the executive committee meeting is that some of this would be explained in the referendum itself. There's an explanatory part, and probably Attorney Letney could explain that again better than I can reiterate it. So I'll ask Attorney Letney to do that in terms of talking about the impact and what the voters would help understand. Because I think one more thing, I think what a referendum does is it allows for education of the voters. They may not the taxpayers may not have a full understanding of where the city is at, and I think a referendum like this is a really good education campaign. So, Attorney Letney, could you explain that education piece on the referendum regarding the ballot?
Attorney Letney.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alder Taft. In addition to the referendum question, which will be on the ballot, and again, the way the referendum question may be phrased is very specifically defined by the statute. There is an opportunity to place some language explaining the referendum, explaining the reasons for it as far as what the law says, and explaining the effect of it. So we could include, for example, that somebody has a home worth $100,000, it would increase their annual property tax by so many dollars. And then explaining what a yes or a no vote on the referendum would mean. Obviously, there's not a lot of room. It has to be concise, but we do have that opportunity, and we would be putting that on along with this question.
Please continue, Alder Taft.
Thank you for that. And the one other thing I wanted to say was that we can decide as a council this evening how we want this referendum to read. I mean, if we wanted to say, this to be applied to healthcare costs in general, instead of, specifically retiree healthcare costs, we could amend this right now and say, we want the language to say this referendum is to reflect healthcare costs, necessarily targeting retiree healthcare costs, because the benefit would be the same. It would help us deal with these rising costs that are critical for us to deal with. So, Attorney Letney, could you speak to whether that would be too broad or whether or not that would be permissible?
The statute just requires the purpose of the requested increase be placed on the referendum. If council wants to have it say healthcare costs or health insurance, it certainly could, or something else, I suppose.
Alder Taft, are you proposing an amendment?
Not at this time. Is there anybody else in the queue?
There is. Alder Lemke is behind you.
Okay, I'll let other folks in the queue have their say before I make any amendments.
Thank you. Alder Lemke.
Thank you. I was just going to some extent, echo a bit of what Alder Taft and Alder Tate II both said. I don't feel inclined today to endorse if this is the right path or not, but I certainly think it'd be irresponsible not to at least give the voters a choice. If they don't want this on the tax levy, they can more than happily vote it down. And I mean, they voted me in, and I'm happy to, abide by whatever decision they come up with. But the fact of the matter is, $4.5 to $5.5 million as a proportion of our budget isn't going to come from the sky. And, we may be able to plug holes with grants. We saw, up to 1.5 million in grants, but, this isn't going to come from nowhere. The reason it's a structural deficit instead of some sort of temporary deficit is because of, ongoing, continuing costs, and, whether it's one thing or the other, whatever. But I think we need to at least put it on the ballot. People can vote it down if they think it's a terrible idea, and I'm, like I said, I'm happy to abide by that. But I certainly encourage the other alders to think, where are you going to suggest coming up with the money? Where are you going to suggest cutting? Because we're going to be in these same seats in November, and we're going to be having hard discussions. And, we're talking already about, in the last COVID-related discussion, we talked about having people come up with a 5% cut for every department, having people come up with a 10% cut for every department, holding positions open. That might be, that may be, something in an area we're really passionate about or that we've heard from our voters a lot. And so, quite frankly, if we don't do it, we might be sitting here saying, okay, well, great, now we're going to cut 10% from every department. I don't know the right answer at this moment, but I certainly think we should at least give the option for people to be heard. And again, I'll abide by whatever people say. I'm not endorsing that this is the completely appropriate path or this is an inappropriate path, but I think we should at least provide an option for that and listen to what people say, because it's their voices we're going to hear. Because please understand that we're not going to escape making hard decisions that might also drastically affect our constituents' lives. So I think at least giving them the option and them the power to think about some of these things is important.
Thank you, Alder Lemke. Alder Taft.
Yes. Oh, my hand is still up. I didn't mean that. If I'll let other people in the queue again. I'm sorry. Go first and then come back to me.
Okay. Alder
Thanks.
Tate the second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to reiterate my initial remarks regarding this is, again, a tool. And we're facing a significant deficit, structural, and it's a tool that we have it's a one-off. So for this year, if this passes, this will be available, and then a smaller portion in perpetuity. But the reality is we're going to make very difficult decisions this fall. And the intention of this is to provide an opportunity for our voters to say whether or not there is an additional tool you have to use in making those very difficult decisions. It's not about inequity or making things unfair, or it's literally saying we are going to make hard choices this fall. We'd like to ask you whether this is an additional tool we can use this fall going forward. I believe and I trust that the people will say yay or nay, and it will be, I don't think this, if it comes down, it's not going to be a close decision if people vote in either direction, because it's going to be obviously either yes, we absolutely want you to have this tool, or absolutely not, we don't want this tool being used, our taxes are what they are, we'd like them to stay that way. Either way, if this proceeds forward and the people vote, I will be entirely okay with the outcome, because I've already steeled myself since last year's budget discussions to make hard decisions this year. I've been of no mistake in my mind that cuts are coming and they're not going to be pleasant this fall. That's a reality no matter what. So when we talk about who's going to get hurt or the equity and these sorts of things, cuts are coming. And when cuts come, I intend for them to be as equitable as possible in removing the harm to those who have been mostly disproportionately affected for the last 25 years, and ensuring that the cuts don't hit them as hard as it hits in other departments. That's going to happen. I'm ready to do that. But on the flip side, we all have to do our due diligence and provide ourselves with all the tools we can before we go into this budget cycle where things are, I just want to make it clear to all the council members. After we set our budget for this year, there will be people who no longer are employed with the city of Racine. That's the reality. That's what we're facing. Now, if you don't want the citizens to answer this particular question, as others have said, I hope you've decided in your mind what departments you're willing to see substantially decrease in their budgets and which people are either going to get early retirements or dismissed altogether from the city of Racine. These are the positions that we're in. These are the decisions that we have to make. And I hope that each of you who ran and decided to sit in these seats understand this is the reality of the choices that we're all going to have to make. And this referendum is simply an additional tool that that the citizens may make available to us in making these extremely difficult decisions. That's all this is. And again, like Alder Lemke, I'm not endorsing yay or nay on this. I simply want to know, is this a tool you allow us to use, or is this a tool that you do not want us to use? And if no, I'm ready for either outcome. Because again, this particular question doesn't fill the hole, it just shrinks it so that the cuts don't have to go as deep. But I think most of us, I think some of us at least, are prepared to cut deep, even though most of us really would not want to. And we're having to reorient ourselves on how we plan on going about making those cuts. But I don't want to have to make them deeper than are necessary if we don't have to, if the citizens allow us not to. But if we do, I'm ready. I hope all of us are too. But that's the only point of this question, is to ask how deep of the cuts do we have to make, and how deep do our citizens want us to go? That's what the question really is. We can frame it in all sorts of ways. The question is a tax increase, but the reality is a cut. And how deep is it going to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Tate. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the item before us? Anyone else who'd like to speak to the item before us? Alder Glenn.
Thank you. As we're talking about tools and everything, this is to the taxpayers, homeowners, this is a hammer to them. This is not a tool that we do want to hit down with our taxpayers, property owners and stuff like that. Don't want to leave it up to them. They want to bring it to us. I'm totally against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Glenn. Any further discussion on the item? Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll. I'm sorry, Alder Taft.
So I am interested in whether my colleagues would be interested in changing the language to reflect rising healthcare costs in general, rather than specifically retiree healthcare costs. So if someone is interested in that, you can second. If not, that's fine. We can have a chat about that if that's something that people are uncomfortable with and that would make them more comfortable. I just want to open that up for discussion. So I'm making a motion.
Okay. If you would like to state your amendment to the motion.
A move to amend the referendum language to reflect rising healthcare costs in general and not necessarily specifically retiree costs.
And just looking at the item as it's written, 0553-20, the last line says, well, with health insurance for City of Racine retired employees, would it be your intention to strike the word retired?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is there a second for that motion?
Second, Mayor.
What? No.
I'm sorry to interrupt on that.
If you would be willing, Alder Taft, could we have it read City of Racine employees and retirees?
Sure, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
For City of Racine employees and retirees is the amended language. Is there a second for that, Alder Levy? Are you seconding that?
Yes, I'll second that.
Great. Alder Taft, would you like to speak more to your amendment?
I just think the purpose of this referendum doesn't change. I think if we're really trying to address the gap of the healthcare cost, and that's what I want the referendum to reflect.
Understood. Alder Levy, you seconded. I didn't ask if you wanted to speak to it. Alder Levy, would you like to speak to the amendment?
No, I think alders have explained it very succinctly.
Thank you, Alder Levy. Alder Jones. Alder Jones, you have the floor.
Excuse me, I.
Oh, second.
I'm sorry, Alder Jones, your connection is a bit choppy. Can you repeat that?
She said she had just raised her hand to second the motion.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry about that, Alder Jones. Your connection is cutting in and out. Our apologies, Alder Jones, for the connection. Alder Taft?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have put my hand down. I'm done.
Okay. Alder Perez?
Thank you, Your Honor. When do we actually vote on the new budget? The final version?
The final vote on the budget will be approximately a week to 10 days after the general election in November.
So by that point, we would have had the input of the community?
We would.
And enough time to make amendments if we need to?
If need be.
Okay, thank you.
It's a very important timing question. Thank you. Alder Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had one particular question as it relates to the numbers. How much goes out of our general budget for retiree health care per year?
I will refer your question to Ms. Fisher.
About $9.5 million of our budget goes to retiree health care each year. Again, we are self-insured for a large group of those people, so it does fluctuate from year to year. But on average, the last 2 years, it's been about $9.5 million out of the $21 million.
Part of the reason I asked that is because I think the question as it was originally posed is accurate. If not for that particular expenditure, we wouldn't be asking that question. You know, we'd have a $9 million or $5 million surplus each year going forward, or, you know, reducing the tax levy by $5 million. If not, or as former administrators probably say, but for that particular expenditure as it relates to retiree healthcare. And I think that's why it's particularly noted that the referendum's for that, because if not for that, we wouldn't be asking this question. We would be able to sustain and manage our costs. And this is not a situation that most other municipalities have to pay for or deal with. You know, we put ourselves in this position, you know, maybe short-sightedly, maybe just based on the economics of the time. But, you know, we have folks who've been on retirement since 1970, and the city's contributing to that. That's a very, very, like, longer than I've been. So when we talk about kind of why that particular question is there, it's because that's the piece that if it wasn't there, we probably wouldn't be in the circumstances that we're in. And it's not their fault at all that they negotiated, you know, forcefully and got benefits. It's not necessarily the city's fault at the time that it didn't predict that healthcare costs would become what they are, but it's certainly the reality today that if not for that particular cost, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. In addition to the other structural outside things. So that's why kind of expanding it to, you know, every employee is almost disingenuous, because those costs are to be expected to be incurred by the revenues. We expect to pay for the insurance of the people who are providing the service. Taxpayers might be surprised to find out that they're paying for folks who retired in the 1970s. And that's particularly why the question is kind of, as presented, is apropos. And it's not just a matter of paying, but paying with, you know, minimal contribution, if not at all, which is what we changed last year. Is we restructured, you know, how much was contributed by the retirees to kind of balance it out. The other piece of it is, you know, when we ask it together, we're not making the distinction between the costs that are expected to be incurred, which is for your employees, and the costs that are surprisingly incurred, which are those for who are no longer employees. So I don't necessarily support the amendment because I thought the language was appropriate as is, because it really points to why are we asking for these funds? This is why. This is what is the situation this is the expenditure that is surprisingly here and that is contributing heavily to our fiscal situation. So do we want to address that this way, or do we have to, and here's the flip side. If we identify it as for the retiree healthcare benefits, then people have a clear distinction on, okay, if we're going to contribute, it's going to kind of fund that. But if it doesn't pass, the reality is the retiree healthcare benefits won't probably be affected significantly. It's the current people who work for the city who will. That's where the primary cuts are going to come from. Because we're not talking about a 10% or 5% cost to the healthcare benefits. It's to the departments. That's to the employees who are currently here. That's why, again, I think it's important to distinguish the employee groups, or the employee versus retiree groups, because the one that's going to be affected if this doesn't pass is the one who, as originally presented, was not indicated in the original question. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Tate. Alder Horton.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. I didn't want to speak to the amendment. I just on the item, and I think that we've had some real, serious dialogue. I'm kind of torn here because I do have a lot of people that live in the district that are on fixed income, but they're not city employees. So their concern is, they are in a crisis too, to help bail out, city employees. But on the other end, I don't have any problems with those that are retired from the city. And I think that President Tate and the other alders said, they said a lot tonight. And I know it's going to come down to us making hard decisions. And I'm ready for that too. So I hear everybody saying that they're ready for it. So it's just the world we live in. We had a 5.2 last year, and I wasn't expecting I wasn't expecting anything different this year, because it was already projected that year after year we would be in this position. So I do think that we have an opportunity here that with me, I think it could go either way. I would like to hear from the voters, but then on the other side, on the flip side of this too, is that there's no easy answers tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Horton. Any other discussion on Alder Taft's amendment? I don't see any other hands raised. I'm going to ask the city attorney to read back the amendment just to make sure we've got this precisely correct. Or do you have it, Kathleen?
I'll have to read it.
Okay.
So the amendment would change the language regarding the purpose for the referendum, and that clause would say, if the amendment passes, the increase to be used for the purpose of paying costs associated with health insurance for City of Racine employees and retirees.
Okay. The clerk will open, or I'm going to open the roll. When the clerk calls your name, please vote as you wish.
Alder Peterson?
Yes to the amendment.
Alder Tate?
No.
Alder Perez?
Yes.
Alderwoman Glenn?
No.
Alder Santiago?
No.
Alder Mikma?
No.
Alder Cole?
No.
Alder Peterson?
Oh, you already did.
Oh, sorry. Alder Levy?
Aye.
Alder West?
No.
Alder Land?
Yes.
Alder Horton?
No.
Alder Lemke?
No.
Alder Jones?
Yes.
Alder Taft?
Yes.
Alder Young.
Nay.
8 noes, 7 ayes.
The motion fails, 7 ayes, 8 nays. So that's the amendment to the main motion. Now we go back to the main motion unamended. Is there any further discussion on the amendment back in its original form before we cast our votes? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the clerk to read back the full motion before we take our vote. Again, this is item, if you could read the last item. Yeah.
Okay. Communication sponsored by Alder Tate II, Alder Cole, and Alder Taft, proposing that the Common Council pass a resolution to place a referendum on the November 3rd, 2020 ballot to pose the question of increasing the property tax levy for the purpose of paying costs associated with health insurance for City of Racine retired employees.
I'm going to open the roll. When the clerk calls your name, please vote as you wish.
Alder Peterson?
No.
Alder Tate?
Aye.
Alder Perez?
No.
Alderwoman Glenn?
No.
Alder Santiago?
Aye.
Alder Mikma?
No.
Alder Cole?
Aye.
Alder Peterson. Alder Levy?
Aye.
Alder West?
No.
Alder Land?
Yes.
Alder Horton?
Aye.
Alder Lemke?
Aye.
Alder Jones?
Alder Jones? Alder Jones? Okay. Did you hear that as an aye? Okay. Alder Taft? Alder Taft?
Aye.
Alder Young?
Alder Young?
Nay.
Motion carries 9-6. Alder Tate, did you have any other items under the executive committee report for separate consideration? Sorry.
No, I do not.
Okay, then we will remove the remaining items to the consent agenda.
I haven't read the
Oh, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please read the item.
item 0550 communication sponsored by Alder Taft on behalf of the city attorney. The city attorney meet with the executive committee pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85(1)(e) and 19.85(1)(g. Litigation in which the city is likely to be involved, prospectively brought by Kurt Hansen and Melissa Hernandez to address litigation strategy and bargaining and negotiation strategy. Recommendation was to approve the negotiated settlement as presented. Fiscal note: the settlement amount is $270,000 will be paid in the amounts of the following accounts, the listed accounts, judgment and claims, and contingency, respectively.
Alder Code, did you have a question or a comment?
I just want to roll call vote on this, please.
Alder Code calling for a separate vote on item 0550-20. Any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, I will open the roll. When the clerk calls your name, please vote as you wish.
Alder Peterson?
Yes.
Alder Tate?
Aye.
Alder Perez?
Yes.
Alderwoman Glenn?
Yes.
Alder Santiago?
Aye.
Alder Mikma?
Yes.
Alder Coe,
No.
Alder Levy,
Aye.
Alder West, Alder West,
Aye.
Alder Land,
Aye.
Alder Horton,
Aye.
Alder Lemke,
Abstain.
Alder Jones,
Aye.
Alder Taft,
Aye.
Alder Young.
Aye.
13 ayes, 1 no, and 1 abstain.
The motion passes with 13 ayes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. Alder Tate, at this time, I would entertain a motion to support the consent agenda.
Move to adopt the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Seconded by Alder Coe. All those in favor of the consent agenda, let me just unmute everybody. Please say aye.
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 All right, that motion carries. That now moves us on to Common Council announcements. Just as a reminder, Common Council announcements cannot be about the items that were on the agenda before us, nor can they be discussions of political, community events, discussions of matters related to government businesses is prohibited, and it is for recognition of city residents and employees, memorials, and non-political community events. Any announcements? Let's start with Alder Mietma.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just wanted to wish my oldest a happy birthday. He turned 6 this past Saturday and was featured in the Journal Times the other day for the Peep Show. It was pretty famous kid now.
All right. Congratulations to your son.
Thank you.
Already goes so fast.
Yeah.
Alder Perez.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to wish a happy birthday to my granddaughter, Annika Jean Perez, who turns 5 today. To my wife, who turns, I don't know, really old tomorrow. And our anniversary the next day on Thursday of 37 years. So.
All right. Well, congratulations to your granddaughter and your wife, and good luck to you, Alder Perez. Alder Tate.
Yes, I just want to extend condolences to the Racine Fire Department. One of our firefighters passed unexpectedly, not while on duty. And just want to send our deepest condolences to the entire RFD on behalf of the Common Council.
Thank you, Alder Tate. I appreciate you mentioning that very much. With no other announcements before us, Alder West, at this time I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second? Many seconds. We are now adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.